Hi, this is Jeremy from My Mother's Daughter Hand Spun, and in this video I am going to demonstrate how I core spin. I'm going to try to keep it as brief as I can. I love core spinning, so there's a good chance I'm going to talk too much. But first I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the core yarn. There's not a major secret or special kind of core that you need to get. It just needs to be a good sturdy yarn. I prefer maybe thinner yarns because you're adding a lot of extra twist into the core as you core spin, and so the thinner the yarn, the more twist it can handle. That being said, there are some bulky yarns that I use, and I'll show you one of those in just a moment. But for this video, the yarn I'm using is just a wool cone yarn that I found at a thrift store. It's really lightweight. You can see it's a 2-ply. And I like this yarn because it is fuzzy and woolly, and the extra fibers kind of grab onto the fibers that I'm trying to core spin, and so it makes it kind of nice and smooth. This is a worsted weight, just a simple yarn that I get. It's acrylic from Hobby Lobby. It's 4-ply, and I like it because it's thin. It doesn't get too hard as you over twist it, too much energy, but it's bulky enough that, you know, it gives a nice bulky yarn, because I like really fat yarn. So that is real fun, simple yarn that I use. This is probably the bulkiest yarn that I will use as a core. It's Lion Brand Landscapes, and it's a single spun yarn, and it's very loosely spun so it can handle all that extra twist. The key with this particular yarn, though, and any other single that you would want to use as a core, is that you want to make sure you spin in the same direction that the core yarn was spun in, because if you spin in the opposite direction with it being a single, it's going to come unspun and then draft apart as you're trying to work with it. So just make sure it's the same direction. I think the most important part, or the most important thing to keep in mind when you're core spinning is your tension. At least that's what I have found to dictate the amount of energy that is in the finished yarn more than just about anything else. You want your tension such that your yarn will slowly, gradually, kind of on its own, without too much work from you, go on to the bobbin. You don't want to have to pull it back, and you don't want to have to really force it on. So if you're finding that it's not going onto the bobbin and you don't at all, then you don't have enough tension. If you find that you're having to really hold on to this core and kind of tug it to make sure that it doesn't go on too fast, then you have too much tension. And the way that I want my tension, the way I determine if I have enough or just right amount of tension, is I wrap my yarn around my hand, because I don't want to have to hold on to my core, because doing that is going to add extra twist, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But with my thumb and my index finger facing my wheel, I wrap my yarn just one time. And you don't want them crisscrossing, just one, parallel strands there. And then slowly begin to twist or to spin, and you want that yarn to just kind of slowly move on to the bobbin on its own. I'm not doing anything. I'm placing a little bit of pressure with my thumb or my pinky and my ring finger, but beyond that I'm not doing much to it to keep it from going on or to keep it from staying off the bobbin. It's slowly feeding on itself, and that's how I check my tension, because that's how I want it. So if you're having to grab a hold of your core yarn to keep it from going on the bobbin as you spin, then all of the energy or all that twist is going into your core yarn, and it's stopping where you're pinching. And so between your orifice and your pinched core, all of the twist is building up energy in that short space. So as you move it onto the bobbin, then that's lots of over-energized yarn feeding onto the bobbin. And then you move your hand down, you pinch, and then there's just a small amount of space for that twist to build up, and it's creating a lot of energy, which you then move on to your bobbin again. So by twisting it around or wrapping it around your hand, you're giving it a lot more length for that twist to build up in the core. And I don't know if that makes sense. Probably as you're doing it, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll explain that a little bit more as I'm going. So I tear off a chunk from my bat and begin twisting, letting those fibers kind of just grab onto my core. Then I pinch with my thumb and my index finger, and I draft. And so that's really the only time I'm pinching my core is when I'm drafting. And it's for the sake of grabbing the drafting fibers, not stopping the core from going onto the bobbin. So bending my ring and pinky finger down and pinching with my thumb and index finger. So I'm controlling the tension more with my pinky and ring finger, and I'm drafting with my thumb and index finger. And so with these fingers bent down, you can see I'm not grabbing my core. It's still in there very loose. It just creates a little bit of tension on it. But unlike when you pinch the core and the energy and twist is building up in that short space, now I've got almost like 7 or 8 inches of yarn for that twist to build up in and redistribute down the yarn. So by pinching, I'm not pinching and stopping the twist at all. The twist that is being added into that core as I spin is twisting all around that whole length of yarn there. So hopefully that makes sense, but that will help keep it from being over-energized, just because the twist that you're adding back into that core is being a little more evenly distributed than it would be if you were clamping down on that core to keep it from going onto your bobbin. So play around with your tension and try to wrap your yarn around your hand and set the tension in such a way that you're really not having to fight with that core to keep it from going on the bobbin too fast or too slow. You want it to feed on kind of gently and naturally. Treadle slow. You want your lowest ratio and a slow treadle to keep from adding too much twist back into the yarn. And then when you're done with your yarn, you set it just like you would any other yarn. I soak it in hot water and let it hang to dry, and it will redistribute some more of that twist, and it'll cause these fibers to kind of shrink down a little bit over that core so that they won't unravel as you use your yarn. I've never had a core spun yarn unravel doing things this way. So that is how I do it. If you have any questions, please say so in the comments if this isn't clear. I'm trying a new video setup, but I'm not sure how I feel about it, so please feel free to comment on that too if you just can't see what I'm doing, if the angle or light is no good. And also, before I finish, I did want to show you some of my completed yarns, just to give you an idea of how these turn out. So this is a plain core spun single. You can see it's got a little more energy than applied yarn. And you can tell by the way the skein kind of has this little twist, the whole skein twists in one direction there. But it's still a real drapey yarn, very usable. And I use my core spun singles for anything that I would use applied yarn for. So I use them as a warp yarn as well. I wouldn't use a regular single that way, but because the core is already plied, it's generally a lot stronger. You don't have to worry about it breaking under tension. So I core spin locks the same way I do my bats. These are core spun locks, and you can tell there is a little more energy, but no more so than a regular single. The skein twists a little bit, but it's still very drapey, very usable. I knit these, I crochet them. And finally, this is a 2-ply core spun. So I used 2 different bats, and I core spun them, and then I plied them together. Doing this, you get a really nice balanced drapey yarn. It's typically pretty bulky because core spuns are a little bulkier than a regular single. But I love them this way. It's one of my favorite ways to spin. And it really shows off the fibers from the bats and all the different things in it. That's the joy of core spinning. Things don't get lost in the twist like they do when you spin a regular single. So another way to do it, if you end up with a core spun that's super overspun, just Navajo ply it and get a nice 3-ply out of it. There's nothing wrong with an over-energized core spun yarn. You can Google collapse weaving and maybe try that with it. Otherwise, just ply it. They ply beautifully. You can ply with thread. You can ply them with commercial yarns, hand-spun singles, or other core spun yarns. And again, Navajo ply for a really nice effect and a lovely yarn. So thank you for joining me. This is Jeremy, again, from My Mother's Daughter Handspun. You can find me on Instagram at My Mother's Daughter Handspun. You can also find me on Etsy at Mom's Daughter Handspun. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Thanks a lot.